Run It Studios is the home of the Run Radio podcast and runradio.net, a podcast and station about the relentless, resilient, and innovative types, inspiring strides in life, business, and beyond. Welcome back to the Run Radio podcast. I'm Trina Wilcox with Run It Studios, and this guest on the Run Radio podcast knows everything about what this podcast is about. We talk about running things, and we use running metaphorically a lot. We run our lives, our business, but we are also physical about it. And for me, running has been kind of the ultimate teacher. It teaches you endurance, patience. It just ticks all the boxes for me. And I have a feeling you might say some of the same. I'm really interested to get into this conversation. Welcome the author of The Miles We Run, Alison Better Solway. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Trina. It's a real pleasure to be here.
So how long have you been running? When did you start?
I don't even know. I've been running for almost 30 years, probably.
Yeah.
So I feel the same way as you. It's taught me so many valuable lessons, and it's been a constant in my life.
In the beginning, for me, it was the punishment. It's what we had to do in PE. It's what you were supposed to do if you did something wrong in practice. But then when you get to a place where it's almost a relationship, it's this thing that pushes you and drives you and encourages you. What was it like for you when you started out? Did you always love it, or was it kind of like I'm not sure about this just yet?
I think that's exactly it. I wasn't sure about it. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it, or maybe I hated it more than I loved it at first. But once I started doing it more regularly, I started feeling so good after the run that it overshadowed the feeling of getting up and doing the run, because I tend to work out and run first thing early morning.
Mhm.
So, sometimes getting out of bed on a cool or rainy day, it's not something that you're necessarily that gung ho to do. But if you think about how you feel when you're done, that helps incentivize you and gets you going.
Absolutely. What do you feel like? What are some of the top things running has taught you?
Oh, it's taught me so much. It's taught me about patience. It's taught me about resilience. It's certainly taught me about discipline.
Mhm.
Running is a definite discipline. It's taught me how to calm down. It's taught me how to think more deeply. It's also taught me how to let go and just not think at all, and just, be present and listen to the music that, is in my earbuds, or the podcast that I'm engaged with. So it's really been all encompassing in terms of lessons.
When did writing come into play? Have you always been a writer, or did you start having all of these experiences that you knew you had to get down?
I've always really loved to write.
Mhm.
The book manifested when we were struggling through infertility and surrogacy, when I was told I could no longer carry any children after the birth of my daughter. And I started journaling our experience. So I had always enjoyed writing,
Mhm.
except I never really thought of myself as an author, nor did in a million years did I think I'd publish a successful book. So, years after we were successful, I put my journals away, and I thought to myself, I'm going to wait and see when the time would be right, maybe to revisit those journals.
Mhm.
I knew I had a story, but it wasn't the right time to write it. And about 5 years ago, I took those journals out. I started to reread them. I was at a better place in my life where I had more time to focus on things that I wanted to do for myself and not for my children, because they were grown. And that's when I thought, you know what? I have a story here. And then I started training for the New York Marathon. where I really started to get deep into the weeds in training. And I realized that so many of the same shared qualities that got me through our surrogacy journey, I also called upon when I was starting to run more distance than I had ever before.
Okay. So was that New York City Marathon your first marathon?
Yes. Yes.
What did you think?
I thought it was awesome. I thought it was so effing hard. Uh, like nothing prepares you to run a marathon. Race day, and I should know this, I've only run, I shouldn't say only. I've run the one marathon. I've done half marathons, but nothing prepares you for race day. You can be as prepared as you think, and then race day, can just throw you such a loop.
Yeah.
And it was just such an exhilarating experience. I was so proud of myself. It was so hard, but it was so awesome. And I crossing that finish line is like a feeling I will never forget.
Good, good. I do. I hope you never forget that and just love it forever.
I do.
And again, you're right. It's just one more metaphor. You can train, you can prepare, but when life hits, when race day comes, it's go time, and you don't know what's going to come up. You don't know if your lace is going to come untied. You don't know if you're going to fall down in mile 25. I mean, you just don't know.
So true. So true.
So, so tell me more about everything coming together. The what went through your mind throughout that race, and where did you pull that energy from, or the endurance from?
So it was 2022, and that particular day, so the New York City Marathon used to be in October, but because of the humidity, they moved it to November. So nobody thought it would be like 30 degrees on November 6th, 2022. And
Oh,
my corral time wasn't until 20 to 11 a.m.
you're a
So
running trainer. So people that don't understand that, that is like asking you to wait until the end of the day
that
to
is
go
correct.
run.
That is correct. And I was mid corrals, so I wasn't even in. I it just it the humidity through, I think most runners that year through such a loop, because you train your time, and things definitely come up, as you said, shoes and whatnot, but I hadn't prepared for, like, rain, yes, humidity, no. And when it's as hot as it was, I realized after the first 6 miles, I could not sustain the pace that I had been running because I wouldn't make it to the end. So I had to recalculate, reformulate every single mile from there and start hydrating at the hydrating stations. I wasn't. I had my own, water and Gatorade on me, but I had to slow down at each water station and almost take a reset, an internal assessment, and then move continue on. So the time wasn't what I thought it would be. Not none I ran this marathon with my brother and sister. None of us achieved what the times we thought. And
Yeah.
most people who ran that day were like 45 minutes to an hour outside what their time would have been. It was
Mhm.
so hot.
Mhm.
Like I was sweating before I even started running. And that's how hot, like, the asphalt was off the bridge, like it. But that aside, it was just such an exciting experience. Like I just felt the whole city was alive. I've never seen New York like that. And just, the cheering of the crowds and the bands. And I've done enough races where, yes, it's really nice that people come out to cheer, but this was like citywide,
Yeah.
and like lines and lines of people at either side of the road, and you running through each borough and getting a flavor of the diversity. It was just so awesome. It was just everything about
Magical.
it. Yeah,
Good.
it was
Good.
magical, truly.
So, did you kind of, as you wrote your book, when it was time to start writing, what was your process? I've heard so many different ways that people write. People will dedicate time, people will pop over and write when it's good for them. Some will note on their phone, others use pen and paper. What was your whole process like? Did it change too as you went?
Mhm. So every spare moment I had, I was dedicating to writing. I once I knew I was going to write the book. I'm a very determined individual. I was like, okay, this is my path now. So I'm a personal trainer as a profession. So once I was done seeing my clients, then I would allocate the time that didn't disrupt my family life to writing. So like late afternoons, evenings, and I really did it at my computer. I first transcribed all my journals into, a Google Docs
Mhm.
form. And then I had those journal entries, but nobody's interested in just reading, stream of consciousness journal, not at least not they wouldn't be interested in mine. And so I had to, edit it, and I had to kind of figure out what the narrative of our infertility and surrogacy story was. And that's one component of it. And then I had to think about how I wanted to weave the literal and the metaphorical aspects of training for a marathon.
Mhm.
Because yes, I did train for a literal marathon, and that is very pervasive throughout the entire book, but it also appealed to the metaphorical marathons that we all run in
Mhm.
our everyday lives. And so reading the miles we run, you don't have to have struggled through infertility. You don't have to have had run a marathon, a literal marathon, but nobody has a flat road. Everybody has twists and turns and hills and descents. And we've all had hardships that we've had to overcome. And it's really a book about our own resilience, and I tell it through my narrative,
Mhm.
but I ask the reader to reflect on their own stories and where they've had to pull on their own internal strength and recognize the resilience within themselves.
Goodness. You talk a little bit about having had a near death experience that led you to the surrogacy.
That's correct. Yes.
How, and that was after the birth of your first child?
During the birth of my
During.
first child.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I feel
So
like, okay, please tell if you don't mind.
oh, of course. And again, this is all in the miles we run. I had a very I'd never been pregnant. I had a very challenging pregnancy, not really recognizing how challenging it was because I had never experienced pregnancy before. And my body was definitely giving upward after 5 months. There were a lot of warning signs that I probably should have listened to more. I had it, a lot of shortness of breath. I had swelling, but my obstetrician kept insisting that everything I was feeling, although exaggerated, were normal symptoms of pregnancy.
Okay.
So if you have an expert, a specialist, a doctor telling you that this is normal, it got to my 8th month, and I was leaving work, and I knew that something was very wrong. And instead of going home, I went right to the triage at the hospital where I had been seeing my obstetrician. And I was in right congestive heart failure. So, I was admitted. I was told that I would most likely be, induced over it was the Good Friday weekend, long weekend. And, yeah, it was like an episode of ER. I speak to it,
Yeah.
in those early chapters of the book. And, I was very fortunate that she was fine, and I was very fortunate that my heart stabilized after her birth.
Would that have been something that would have happened anyway, or was this all exacerbated by the pregnancy?
No, so I was diagnosed a month later with a rare genetic condition called hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia. It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
It's called HHT. And what it is essentially is it's arterial venous malformation. So a lot of my vessels in my liver and in my lungs don't work properly. So they shunt blood, they don't oxygenate blood properly. And
Oh,
so my liver was shunting too much blood through my heart, just to be a little technical.
yeah.
Um, and for a normal woman going through pregnancy, your blood flow doubles. So my normal prior to pregnancy, my blood flow was already doubled. So during pregnancy, my blood flow quadrupled.
Oh,
So
goodness.
that is why I went into right congestive heart failure.
Oh,
And, I was very blessed that I took myself to the Emerge when I did.
mhm.
And I was blessed that I was able to find somebody because it really was a mystery. It took about a month for me to find a specialist who dealt in, I'm in Toronto, Canada, with, she's a respirologist and deals all things HT, and I adore her. And I've been seeing her for over, 26 years now.
Goodness gracious, I am so glad you
Mhm.
thought to go. I mean, and also how frustrating, you expect that first child, the whole thing to be so happy,
Right.
and it was just stress induced from the get-go. But
Yeah.
thankfully, it brought you to getting help, treating your body better than you didn't know before. So how did things change fitness-wise for you? I'm guessing you are already, taking care of yourself, being healthy throughout your pregnancy, but did this mean new medications? Did this mean new diet and exercise? How did it change?
So it took a while for us to assess and for me to be treated for HHT. It's a bit of a unique condition. Exercise has always been a big part of my life. I once I was stable and once I got back into I'm a new mother and I was home and my daughter was home and we got into a routine, I was able to get back to exercise. The thing that changed for me was that I have to manage my heart rate. So I have spent years and years training myself to keep my heart rate low while I exert.
Wow.
And so that's been, it's a great thing for me, but it hasn't prevented me from doing anything. I'm exceptionally active. Fitness is a huge part of my life. I run 3 to 4 times a week, but I like to keep my heart rate under 135.
Oh, wow. That is
So
pretty low for
yeah, so I actually, and that's even high. I like to really keep it under 130, but
wow.
it's that I've had to train my body.
Yeah.
So slow build to getting to a speed that, I want to be at and that I can, sustain a low heart rate.
Wow, that's a lot. That's Did you have any How did you deal with that emotionally? That's a lot to take on, even though it took a month to get your official diagnosis and care. I mean, being a new mom, having this life-threatening condition,
Right.
what were you thinking?
You know what? I was so grateful that my daughter was okay and that I started to stabilize knowing that I was going to be okay too. That you kind of also, she was so tiny. She was 3 pounds, 7 ounces.
Oh,
You kind of forget about yourself a little
mhm.
bit. And the focus really was making sure she was okay. She was in the NICU for 4 weeks. I wanted to make sure she was feeding. I wanted to breastfeed her for as long as I could. The focus was on her, me getting my strength back so I could, really be there for her, not necessarily for me.
Yeah.
So once, she came home and once she was getting bigger and whatnot, and once I started figuring out my own health conditions, I was able to get back on track. But it took about a year. It took
Yeah.
about a year. It wasn't, it was a challenging year, that's for sure. But having a newborn at home, it made all the lows high.
Yeah, yeah. At what point were you told that you shouldn't carry again? Was that immediate or was that a little ways
No,
down?
that was immediate. That was a very hard doctor's appointment,
Yeah,
and I write about that in the book, and that
good.
was, like, absolute devastation. I'd
Yeah.
always imagined a large family. I'm very close with my siblings, and, I I I just in that doctor's office, she didn't even need to say it out loud, actually. She knew I was gonna ask it, and she just said no, and I started I my husband was there, our daughter was there in her bassinet, and I stopped listening, and all I started to do was figure out how am I gonna get over this and how am I gonna have another child.
Yeah.
And I was like, I remembered hearing about the soap opera star Deidre Hall, how she
Yeah.
had had her children through surrogacy. And I was like, if she figured it out, so am I. Because surrogacy back then, it's so commonplace now. But back then it was shrouded in silence. And there was hardly anybody I knew that had gone
Mhm.
through it because people didn't talk about it.
No, no. How many times have you used a surrogate now?
So we use the same surrogate to have our 3 boys. We had our son Aiden, and then we had twins about a year and a half later, Rowan and Caleb. But it wasn't an easy road finding
Yeah.
our surrogate. So we
Yeah.
went through 1, 2, 3,
Oh
4.
my.
We went through about 4 surrogates
Yeah.
before we were successful. We tried here in Canada for years, and then we eventually went into the US.
Was it hard just finding someone that matched with that you got along with, or were there other hurdles that
No, we are all the carriers that we worked with. Well, 3 of the carriers that we worked with were wonderful. 2 of them, it was never a personality conflict. It was just we had done several attempts with fresh IVF,
Oh, I
with
see.
frozen IVF, and it just wasn't working.
Yeah.
And there was no reason as to why it wasn't working, and we needed to make a change. And then one of the carriers that we had spent about a year of our time invested in. When it came to the psych eval, unfortunately, there were things that I speak of in the book that they weren't honest about, her
Oh,
and her husband. And so we had to part ways before we even began. And I think that was probably a blessing in disguise.
good, good. Do you feel like you have a big enough family now?
Oh, yes.
Good,
Yes. 4
good,
children is a beautiful family. And again, my youngest boys are 20, turning 21.
good,
So
good. So, what kind of running are you doing these days? What else do you do to cross train in between times?
I love to spin. So I will spin on my Peloton. I do a lot of strength training, core Pilates based work. I like to lift weight. I'm very mindful of how I lift, form focused always. I actually have a fitness platform that I started during COVID, absfitness.ca. So I have membership across Canada and the US with it's a great community of women, and I run. Today is a spectacular day in Toronto, and I got up before like around 6:30, and I went out for a good 6K run, which is about 5 no, 6K run is about 4 miles,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
maybe a little less.
When you were talking about 30 degrees at the marathon, I was thinking Fahrenheit, and then I realized you were talking
Okay.
Celsius.
Right.
I
Right.
was like 30 degrees. Oh, chilly. And then I,
Yeah, no, 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 it
yes,
was hot,
yes,
it was
yes,
hot,
yes,
right.
yes. So do you have any plans for another marathon or what's on your agenda for the upcoming months?
I actually am doing a 10-kilometer race
Good.
on Sunday, but, no, I'm not gonna run another marathon. It was really hard on my
Yeah.
body. It was
Yeah.
very hard when I got up there in terms of miles to keep my heart rate down.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't there's no need for me to do it. again, I proved that I could to myself. I like doing half marathons now. So I'll probably, there's a beautiful waterfront marathon in the city. I think I'd like to do that in October. And you know what? I'm grateful literally every time I run. I take, about 60 seconds on every run I do to stop and just, there's a bridge that I like to run over, and I thank my heart, I thank my lungs, I thank my liver, my quads, my knees, my ankles. I'm just
Yeah.
very appreciative of the ability to run. I don't take it for granted.
I feel you. I hear you. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Tell people where they can learn more about you, your fitness program, and your book.
So for my book, themileswerun.com, everywhere you buy books, it's available. And in terms of fitness, the platform is absfitness.ca. Great videos, short, long, great collections that leave you always feeling stronger. Thanks for
Sounds
asking, Trina.
good. Thank you so much. Come back anytime.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can find more videos to listen or watch. Link over to whichever platform you prefer from runitstudios.com. We'll see you next time. Thank you.